development. The overlapping benefits of an energy sector transformation to local economies and climate change response across the Caribbean cannot be overemphasized. In fact, energy security and climate resilience are essentially two sides of the same coin. Renewable energy, RE, and energy efficiency, as we know to be EE, are to date among the most effective tools made available to us in the fight against climate change. But not only that, also in increasing the resilience of Caribbean countries. And I don't only refer to climate resilience, but also economic resilience, and more so in this fight against the negative effects of the COVID pandemic. And the last decade has seen significant technological advancements in both RE and EE. And that, coupled with the growing urgency of climate action, provides us with a renewed impetus for accelerating the development and implementation of sustainable energy projects. And therefore, in November of 2020, the CCREEE launched its project preparation facility, opening up one of two streams, and that was the private sector stream. And so from then, we have been accepting applications and providing support to the private sector in developing projects, making them investment ready and bankable, and therefore able to attract the necessary finance for implementation. In true CCREEE style, the project preparation facility has worked or has achieved its goals through partnerships. And through our November launch, 2020, the CCREEE PPF signed its very first cooperation agreement with the CARICOM Development Fund, allowing us to work very closely with the Credit Risk Abatement Facility, affectionately known as the CRAF. The CCREEE recognizes its other partnerships, and in particular, I'll single out its partnership with Get Invest, GIZ, and PFAN, UNIDO, in providing support to the private sector. I must also mention the continuous support of the TAPSEC program provided directly to the project preparation facility. And with that, I invite you to enjoy this session. And the session will essentially take the form, as I mentioned, of this panel discussion, which will be moderated. And in between, you will be able to enjoy some very short video animations that can summarize what the CCREEE offers and basically some of the discussions that we will have today. So without further ado, I invite to deliver welcome and opening remarks, Mr. Joseph Cox, the Assistant Secretary General of the CARICOM Secretariat. Over to you, ASG Cox.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Gary Jackson, Executive Director of the CCREEE, Ms. Francine Barron, CEO of the Climate Resilience Execution Agency for Dominica, Mr. Clement Williams, General Manager of the St. Kitts Electricity Company, Ms. Francine Blackman, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship at Barbados, Dr. Kira Paul, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of the Blue and Green Economy, Agriculture and National Food Security in Dominica, Ms. Lisa Valmon, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Tourism, International Transport and Maritime Initiatives, Dominica, Dr. Devon Gardner, Head of the Energy Unit at the CARICOM Secretariat, Joseph Williams, Coordinator for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency at the CDB, other senior energy officials from member states and regional institutions, members of academia, civil society organizations, and other non-state actors, members of the International Development Partner community, members of the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all a pleasant good morning. Now, normally when we're doing these things, we jump right into the presentations, but I want to spend just a few moments, if you'll indulge me, to point out to the audience here that the CCREEE, and remind us all that the CCREEE is a unique yet critical regional organization established by regional governments to enable the region's efforts towards desired energy transformation, the economic and ecological advantages of which are well known. The CCREEE is, of course, is pleased to partner with several international development organizations to provide leadership at the level of the executive board and its technical committees. These partners also provide needed technical assistance and financial support to advance efforts to achieve the strategic objectives of the organization and, by extension, the energy revolution. In that regard, we want to acknowledge upfront the support of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, Austrian Development Agency, the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, and the European Union, and the German Cooperation for the International Cooperation, GIZ, through the Technical Assistance Program for Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean, TAPSEC, and the Climate Resilient and Sustainable Energy Supply in the Caribbean, CLARES, the Spanish Agency for International Development, and the Small Island Development States Sustainable Energy and Climate Resilience Initiative, SIDSDOC. This CCREEE is also, of course, very appreciative of the continued support it receives from the government of Barbados, and indeed want to acknowledge that the relationships forged have been instrumental in advancing the work of the CCREEE, and there is much expectation that these partnerships will continue to support the center so that the region's agenda to advance use of renewable energy initiatives coupled with energy efficiency solutions will be realized. Now, ladies and gentlemen, on Wednesday, the 25th of November, when the project preparation facility with the opening of the private sector window was launched, I highlighted that the project preparation facility can serve as a pumping modality that efficiently and effectively moves potentially transformative projects on sustainable energy within CARICOM member states from idea to investment. I highlighted too at that time that the PPF represents a holy grail for the clean energy sector. There's consensus that a considerable number of member states have made considerable progress in the creation of enabling national environments for the promotion of renewable energy, energy efficiency, and other sustainable energy applications. In their current state, all 15 member states have either adopted a national energy policy or have a draft policy that is in an advanced stage of development under consideration. A majority have been setting increasingly ambitious domestic targets for renewable energy use and energy efficiency. At the regional level too, CARICOM energy ministers at the 41st special meeting of the Quoted Energy held in Trinidad and Tobago in 2013 adopted the CARICOM energy policy and the Caribbean Sustainable Energy Roadmap and Strategy, CSERMS. In particular, the CSERMS provides direct focus on the options and opportunities for the use of renewable energy and energy efficiency to catalyze the sustainable development of the region, and has been providing orientation and guidance to member states on the critical consideration for their sustainable energy actions. There's agreement too that a significant number of policies are on the one hand becoming outdated as a multiplicity of disruptions from climate to technology to finance are outpacing the revisions that are necessary for policy considerations to reflect the innovations that are changing what customers want from their energy systems. On the other hand, the gap between policy and regulations continues to be significant, and many countries suffer from an absence of legal certainty that oftentimes deter investments and actions that promote sustainable energy. As a case in point, only 3 member states have net billing laws for supporting the grid interconnection of distributed renewable power generation and efficient cogeneration portfolios, despite the regional agreement among energy ministers in 2013 in this regard. Countries have frequently failed to negotiate contracts and agreements, including power purchase agreements that are linked to current and future progressive utility business models. This is an area that is within the crosshairs of the CARICOM Secretariat, and through the recent policy and regulatory help desk is providing technical support to member states for the development and modernization of the enabling environment for sustainable energy through fit-for-purpose policy and regulations, as well as advisement and negotiation support on contracts and agreements. The resources are currently limited, but we are already on a path towards improving this. But ladies and gentlemen, policies and regulations are not enough. The evidence is that Though necessary, the implementation of policy commitments is not sufficient and have not transformed into real investments or created a vibrant market and industrial sector for sustainable energy in a significant way. There is seeming inability of member states to effectively identify and develop the transformative projects along with the concomitant commercial partnerships that are necessary for the CARICOM energy revolution. Nothing short of an aggressive and disruptive turnaround is required to move our countries from their current states of inefficiency and dependence on mostly expensive imported petroleum fuels to a future in which energy is sustainably managed through cost-effective, efficient conversion, delivery, and use of diverse, including indigenous sources of energy. The Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, CCREEE, achieved full establishment in April 2018 and has a critical role of supporting the dedicated implementation focus that is required for the energy revolution within CARICOM. While many development partners have sought to assist the region to find the holy grail of project preparation that would improve the quality and quantity of sustainable energy projects in member states, the CCREEE has, through the PPF, demonstrated acceptance of the main reason for establishment, that is, supporting public and private sector interests operating within CARICOM countries with preparation assistance for sustainable energy projects. To be successful, the project preparation facility should support activities along the entire spectrum of the project development value chain, from the ideation to financial closure. Accordingly, the PPF is being designed to include project design, pre-feasibility and feasibility studies, environmental, social, and other impact studies, risk assessments, identification of project level and related indicators, advisory services and/or other services to the commercial structure for projects. Without massive investments, upwards of $20 billion US, the CARICOM energy revolution and the achievement of our respective sustainable development goals, especially for economic growth and social improvements, will remain out of reach. The PPF, through its support of both public and private sector actors, has an important role to play. Neither the private nor public sectors can do it alone. Through its actions, the PPF will need to focus heavily on the commercial structures for projects that allow public resources to be used in a catalytic way to attract and leverage sufficient private investments. Ladies and gentlemen, it is clear that we in the region are ripe for investments and that in the energy sector, and the environment is propitious and welcoming. So let us use the PPF as a catalyst for promoting the partnerships and investments needed to improve energy security, resilience, and access to our region, fully cognizant of the fact that energy powers our development and is crucial to sustainable and inclusive growth. With those few words, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you very much, ASG Cox. And now we head over to a very brief video animation.
Burning fossil fuels for energy production and
The Project Preparation Facility, or PPF, is a project development support resource designed to help you advance the preparation of sustainable energy projects so that they can successfully attract financing. The PPF not only provides advice and technical assistance, but also helps to link bankable projects to investors and financiers, and serves as a pathway to much-needed financial investment. If you are a project owner, private sector developer, part of an NGO or similar enterprise seeking to advance a sustainable energy project in the CARICOM member states, then you may qualify for support. The Project Preparation Facility supports medium to high capacity renewable energy and energy efficiency technology projects, including biomass and biofuel, biogas, geothermal, ocean technologies, solar PV and thermal, hydropower, energy storage, wind, waste to energy, and greenfield, brownfield, and scale-up enterprises such as energy power generation, efficiency, and solutions projects. For more information on project preparation facility support, visit www.ccreee.org/ppf.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've now seen a short video that really summarizes what the PPF is, what it offers, the particular technologies that we welcome, and ties in very, very closely to the remarks by ASG Cox, and noting that he's mentioned the facility as a holy grail for the implementation of sustainable energy. Also standing out is the fact that we require as much as 20 billion in investment for project implementation, both RE and EE, to assist us as a region in meeting our goals. Next up, I would love to introduce our moderator for today. And our moderator is the Executive Director of the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, the CCREEE, and Dr. Jackson, through his office, leads the implementation of CCREEE's main priority areas, creating an expert knowledge base, optimizing technological solutions through tool development, and transforming the region by utilizing sustainable energy as a means to advance the well-being of at-risk and vulnerable groups. And I know Dr. Jackson is no stranger to this landscape, as he was appointed to the post of Executive Director in October of 2018. He holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree in Mechanical Engineering and an MSc in Project Management, both from the University of Birmingham, United Kingdom. He also holds a BSc in Mechanical Engineering from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. Dr. Jackson, among many other things, is a registered engineer in Jamaica, a member of the Association of Energy Engineers, a certified energy manager, and a member of the Society of Automotive Engineers. And right before we bring on Dr. Jackson, I invite you once again to view a very brief video that would give us some insights on the panel discussion.
Burning fossil fuels for energy production and transportation has released greenhouse gases that have raised global temperatures, disturbed our climate, and damaged our environment. Despite generating and consuming far less energy than larger, more developed nations, the Caribbean region faces a growing set of hazards like rising sea levels and more intense storm and hurricane seasons, which threaten both lives and livelihoods. In response to this crisis, and through the Paris Agreement, regional governments have committed to nationally determined contributions and the Sustainable Development Goals, or NDC and CDGs, establishing commitments to reducing their reliance on fossil fuels and turning to more efficient, sustainable forms of energy production, such as wind, solar, or ocean technologies. CCREEE is committed to helping governments, stakeholders, and citizens meet their pledges to and do their part by providing expert guidance, technical assistance, project development support, and other resources so that we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, adapt to new threats, and meet increasing energy demands in innovative ways. For more information on how sustainable energy can bolster climate resilience, visit www.ccreee.org.
We now welcome Dr. Jackson to moderate and begin the roundtable discussion.
Thank you very much, Charlene. Good morning, all. I would like to first thank you for being here. It is indeed a pleasure to have you here with us this morning. This is a very important part or time in our lives as we transition to a new and better tomorrow. First, I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel. First, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Francine Blackman, Permanent Secretary in Energy Division of the Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, and also the chair, proud to say, she's the chair of the CCREEE Executive Board. She has responsibility for advancing Barbados' domestic energy aspirations to become 100% renewable or carbon neutral by 2030, as well as to exploit the island's hydrocarbon potential offshore Barbados. Key to driving the renewable energy transformation is the establishment of a conducive environment which encompasses the establishment of the appropriate legislative, regulatory, and market structures. The work includes the development of an integrated resource and resilience plan, the regulatory requirements to advance the exploitation of Barbados wind resources, and electric vehicle strategy to facilitate the transition of the transport sector, and the streaming of licenses regime to encourage more efficient investment in the sector. All of this falls with Mrs. Blackman's remit. Our next distinguished guest I would like to introduce is Mr. Joseph Williams. Let me change that. Mr. Clement Williams, my apologies. Mr. Williams, otherwise known as, we say Clement Williams, but we call him Jomo. So Jomo Williams is an experienced and successful utility industry professional, having worked for nearly 2 decades as an engineer and manager in both the generation and distribution of electricity. In his current role as general manager of St. Kitts Electricity Company Limited, otherwise known as SCELEC, he has been pivotal in helping the transition the company from a government department to a corporatized entity. Under his leadership, the SCELEC recently broke ground of what is poised to be the largest solar farm in the Caribbean region, signaling the company's commitment to renewable energy generation and its commitment to change and innovation. In 2019, Williams joined the CCREEE Board of Directors as one of the newest and youngest members of the board. Next, I would like to introduce Mr. Joseph Williams. Sorry, I got that wrong again. My apologies. Ms. Francine Barron. Ms. Francine Barron was born in Roseau, Dominica, a lawyer by training. Ms. Barron is currently the CEO of the Climate Resilience Execution Agency of Dominica, otherwise known as CCREEE. As the CEO, she is tasked, among other things, with supporting the implementation of Dominica's Climate Resilience Recovery Plan, the achievement of resilience targets, and delivery of major capital projects. Prior to taking up the role of CEO at CCREEE, Ms. Barron held the position of Principal Advisor to the Government of Dominica. From December 2014 to December 2019, she was the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs for Dominica. Next. Now I've reached Joseph Williams. I guess I was just anxious to have Joseph on the screen. Mr. Joseph Williams is Coordinator, Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Unit in the Economic Infrastructure Division of the Caribbean Development Bank. He joined the bank in March 2014 and has played a lead role in the development of the bank's energy sector policy and strategy as Sustainable Energy Advisor and as Program Manager for the Sustainable Energy and Geosmart Initiative. Mr. Williams has over 27 years of experience in the energy sector. Prior to CDB, he was manager of the Regional Energy Program at the CARICOM Secretariat, where, among other things, he led efforts of establishing the CARICOM Energy Policy, which was approved in 2013 to develop the regional strategic framework for implementation of renewable energy and energy efficiency. And our next distinguished guest This is where the foundation is with our youth, Ms. Aria Laidlow. As a lecturer in the Green Engineering at the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Community College, Division of Arts, Science, and General Studies, and the current OECS Ambassador for the Sustainable Development Movement Summit 2021, Ms. Aria Laidlow is diligent and committed to the sustainable development of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the region. In various capacities, Aria has worked and researched in the fields of youth development, climate change, and disaster risk management for over 5 years. Ms. Laidlow has been involved in various youth and led initiatives, such as holding the position of past director of program development for the Commonwealth Youth Council, responsible for climate change and national youth councils, and currently sits as vice chair for women and minorities for the Caribbean Youth Democratic Union. She was also chosen as a global talent to represent the University of Oxford at the UNDP's Unleash SDG Lab, held in Singapore in 2018, and was also featured in the OECS Yes in Action initiative in 2019. Thank you very much for joining us, my distinguished guests. As we navigate this particular topic of climate and energy, one of the things that we have recognized is how do we approach these problems? How do we actually navigate this construct that, you know, we understand that we have a pandemic, we understand that we have vulnerabilities with our natural climate events. One of the things that CCREEE looked at is establish what we call a 5P principle. It refers to people, policy, plan, project, partnership. One of the most important one for us is partnership. And you'll have heard A.G. Cox mention that partnership. You'll have heard my colleague Charlene mention that partnership. And that forms a very strong foundation in how we're going to meet our challenges. Energy, economics, and the environment, the 3 E's, and how these intersect with each other for our survival. You know, our ability to harness what is indigenous to us is very critical as we look to lessen our dependency on fossil fuel. And to make this energy very accessible and affordable to our citizens is very critical as well. Our ability to sustain our economic activities, in particular during times of a pandemic of this order of magnitude, and for countries like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and for Barbados, and for Dominica in 2017, as they experience natural disasters that have disrupted economic activities. How do they survive when it's compounded with a pandemic of this order of magnitude that we're facing today? And as we look at our climate actions, our ability to support our environment, our ability to provide, to make it a cleaner environment for all, for our youth, to provide the enabling environment for our youth to survive what is here to come and what is coming in the future as these particular events become more intense as we move forward. So our policymakers, you are going to be one of our key leaders, our utility leaders. Within transition, it's going to be critical for you. Our multi-development banks, like the Caribbean Development Bank, you know, how we are going to be dealing with these macroeconomics and financing these projects is going to be critical. And our youth, as we navigate this, you know, what type of platform do you think will create an enabling environment for us to drive this transition? And for climate action, in terms of our people, in terms of the persons who are responsible for climate actions, and how you facilitate and engage the energy sector, how do we get to that crossroads and intersect all our efforts and capacities to drive this transformation? So P.S. Blackman, you know, as Barbados with this very ambitious goal, and I'm proud to say you are being my chairman, I'm glad that Barbados have taken this particular stride to look at the future for 2030 by getting to 100% by 2030. Very ambitious, but it should be ambitious, and you should aim for that sky. Now, you know, Barbados have done a lot, and the world is watching you. We have seen the transition you have made in the e-mobility industry. We have seen We have heard your ambitions. We have seen that you have started to take strides. We understand that there are barriers to some of these activities. We understand that there's a policy environment that needs to be more enabling to support these initiatives. And we also understand that you are moving towards getting to this goal, but we want to understand, how do you overcome these barriers, and why is this sustainable energy so important for us where Barbados is concerned, and what kind of advice you can give to the rest of the Caribbean countries as they navigate this space?
Good morning to the other panelists and all those who are participating on this webinar this morning. Thank you for the question. For us in Barbados, this initially started when we saw back in 2008 the crisis with respect to the escalating levels of prices for oil. We saw initially the island for a while have been using renewable thermal energy because we have a 40-year experience, over 40 years experience in using solar hot water, the solar to heat water. But then we recognized back in 2008 that we needed to move the next step when we saw oil prices went to like $164 per barrel of oil and so on. And then we saw really that our fiscal position was also deteriorating. We were literally using a lot of foreign exchange, close to $800 million annually, basically to purchase this oil. And the input from it, when you look at the economy, you were burning so much more in foreign exchange than you were actually getting from the benefit that you've spent in that. So government made a decision that it wanted then to transition to using more of the natural resources around us, the sea, the sun, the wind. And at that time, the energy policy was still fairly conservative, but this new government, when we had that election, sought to embrace going for the 100% renewable. And that is the track that we've been on ever since. Since then, the policy reflects that. We have an implementation plan, and we have done a number of projects in Barbados to support the transition. Initially, it was to demonstrate to the private sector that moving to renewables is a viable option. And we now have buy-in from the private sector, and therefore we now have to change the relevant legislation or regulations and so on to support the demand now that is on the ground, to support the transition, because the grid was not so designed to have the interjections of renewables from all over the island. Basically, it was generating one place and then dispatching, distributing from that central or 4 central locations. So now there's a need also to make sure that the grid keep up with the demand and so on. We've also recently went through a process of rejigging the market structure because we recently concluded our negotiations with the loan utility here to let them recognize that based on the energy policy, government also now is interested in making sure that there's competition being introduced in the market for generation and storage services. So they're no longer responsible for the entire supply chain. And these are some of the things that we are doing. And to support that, we've developed some fairly good relationships with some international development financing. We've had loans circling with and grant financing through the EU, through the IDB, through the Global Climate Fund, and so on to help support. Jeff is another agency that we've had support from. And then other governments such as the Japanese and the South Korean, we've had other developmental projects also going.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I'm calling you chair for this interview.
Okay.
So thank you very much for your intervention. And importantly, I noticed you have mentioned a few of the P's that we have spoken about: policy reform. You also spoke about regulatory reform, understanding the role of the players. You mentioned the utility and the work that you will have to do with them to look at how you want to actually have more access for that distributed generation to support your access and affordability to the rest
Correct.
of the Barbadian, and also the partnerships that you had to forge to create this environment to move things forward and to ensure that you can have sustainability within that framework. So I'd like to thank you very much for that intervention.
And of course, let me say, I didn't want to omit the CDB, who certainly resides here too in Barbados, but they are also part of the partnership that we are trying to build out.
Thank you very much. I was just going to go to Joseph on that matter. But before I do that, and I must apologize to UPS and also to our distinguished panelists and our guests, the Minister of Energy, Honorable Kerry Simmons, was supposed to be here, but he had a very important matter with the opening of Parliament that he had to participate in. So I just want to send our apologies on behalf of the CCREEE on that matter. So that's why he's not here this morning. But I know PS Blackman is representing Barbados in this way, in a very good way. So we are very happy. And she's our chair, so we're happy to have her here this morning. So Joseph, as we navigate, this pandemic has obviously put a strain on a lot of things that we had envisioned for our countries. The tourism sector, we have seen the contraction. We have seen even the contraction in our demand. We have seen the utilities kind of trying to navigate this new phenomenon of how this pandemic is affecting the livelihoods of persons who would have needed affordability to pay for electricity. No, we are trying to understand a little more about how the bank's role will play within this environment. What are some of the key aspects that we would need to consider to navigate this landscape? And as we intend to look at energy still as an input, as an economic driver, how do we maintain a momentum that will facilitate better financing and more aggressive implementation for projects, for sustainable energy projects, and for us to have that interconnection with our climate financing for climate mitigation? Over to you, Joseph. Unmute.
After a year of practice, I still haven't gotten it right. So thank you so much for your patience. We have been using this medium for the last year, given the pandemic, but we still make mistakes in not unmuting. Okay, so thank you so much, and really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this very important panel. And let me just congratulate CCREEE for the initiative, the work you're doing, even as a new organization, and echo the sentiments expressed by ASG in terms of the importance of CCREEE. And in more directly to your question, as you know, CDB is a development bank, which means that our primary focus is around development, it's poverty reduction, and helping the countries to advance on the economic front, as well as social and the environment. All aspects are important now. In fact, our new strategic plan focuses on those three elements: strategic, environmental resilience, economic resilience, and social resilience. So the business of energy is an important part of that. And you have said it well. We all know the script very well, so I don't need to go through that, the importance of it. I think the answer to your question is really about intensifying what we do, the efforts, and emphasizing some other areas. So to begin with, the project preparation facility that is a focus of this conversation is an important step. We have always complained about the fact that projects aren't properly prepared and not bankable and so on. And so it's difficult to finance. And the way to think about financing is no different from, I mean, for renewable energy or in the development space is no different from a commercial bank in the sense that ultimately the project must be able to repay the loan, right? Basically, the bank need to be repaid, and you want to ask all the questions that will give you comfort that that income stream, the cash flow is going to be there, and so on. But more important, but also equally important, I've found that for large projects, it's important to pay attention to the environmental and social dimension. That's critical for the bank. We cannot, all projects must function, operate, be developed, be implemented in a manner that does no harm or is minimized in terms of the environment and the social dimension. So those are things I think that have not been sufficiently addressed over time. So as we face constraints, it means more attention will have to be paid to some of these aspects, because a project could fail or succeed in getting funding, securing the funding in these areas. But I would say, coming back to your point more broadly, I think there is need for greater emphasis now around the regulator part of dimension, because let's face it, if there is certainty and clarity in the regulatory framework, I mean, we could think of a few countries. I mean, Barbados is one of a good example where there's a very clear set of rules around how projects will be supported, facilitated by the utility, or they'll be looked at. There's a clear tariff. And so once you have that kind of clarity, it's very easy for the financing to support that. So I want to emphasize that, because that's an important aspect of getting, especially scale the project. But then sometimes we talk about access to financing and so on, and we overlook the fact that the situation varies for the scale of project. So a small project that is doing some waste to energy or bioenergy, where the supply and reliability of the feedstock is not so firm and the evidence is not so robust, will be treated differently from a solar project where the resource is available and there is a regulatory framework to support that. I mean, the bank will take those into consideration. It's very easy to support the latter because the resource is clear, the regulatory framework, and there is a PPA in place. So when we talk about access to financing, even in this context, I think it's a question of being targeted in how we speak. And I think there are some significant opportunity for support for the smaller projects. And this is where I think CCREEE will make a difference. And certainly we value the input of CCREEE in making a contribution at that level, because that is where a lot of the gaps are in terms of the MSMEs, intervention, the smaller developers, and especially in the context where the regulatory framework is not as robust. So I think it's a matter of emphasizing those areas. It's not different from what we used to do. It's a question of how we're going to focus our energies and collaborate as partners to help support the projects. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Joseph. And I think those are very good points that you have just raised. You know, the certainty in the market it needs to be clear for investors and for development banks to enter into this space. Obviously, the project preparation facility that has been launched, and how that will take these projects to a more bankability within an environment that is certain, of course, and also, you know, the fact of partnership keeps coming up, and it's so critical in when we try to navigate, in particular when we are such small economies, and we have to navigate this space that we bring persons together, bring communities together, bring the key partners together so that we can develop these strategies. Now, with saying how small we are, you know, one of the key things is that we are so vulnerable. Baron, your 2017 experience has really shaken up Dominica to kind of rethink, reshape, and reimagine what the future of Dominica looks like, and how that future can be replicated in other islands as they try to get to a more resilient and sustainable pathway going forward. We have seen what happened in St. Vincent and the Grenadines with the eruption of a volcano and the impact that it not only had on St. Vincent, but also its neighboring countries. And the effect of that is a telling story as to what it is that we will need to do to transform our energy sector that we know is a critical input for economic. How do we transform that, and what are the elements of this climate resilience that we need to consider, and how that can be replicated in other countries? Your experience will be well needed and shared here this morning. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jackson, and all protocols being observed. Good morning to everyone. And I want to say thank you to CCREEE for inviting Dominica to be part of this important discussion. You raised the important question of how do we look at building our resilience, having regard to the extreme vulnerability of our islands. And in Dominica's case, and specifically in relation to the area of energy, we have developed a climate resilience and recovery plan, and we have identified 20 targets that we want to achieve by 2030. So one of those targets is becoming carbon neutral through 100% domestic renewable energy production and an increase in our protected forest areas to 67% of our landmass. Now, we have already begun the journey to transition from imported fossil fuels to a more sustainable mix of national renewable energy sources. The national context of the energy economy in Dominica is similar to that of many small island developing states. We have a high dependence on imported fossil fuels, in our case, above 90%. And a small percentage of energy services provided from national energy resources in the form of hydropower. There is uneven access to energy services for citizens, government, and enterprises, and unaffordably high retail prices to customers for energy services. In addition to this, as you highlighted, our region is highly vulnerable, particularly to extreme weather events such as hurricanes. We had our experience in 2017. We have the Bahamas who had the experience in 2018. And we don't know what this season will bring. We face limited institutional capacity, leadership, collaboration, and cooperation in the energy services sector. And high energy costs are exacerbated by the volatility of energy commodity prices on international markets. We heard from PS out of Barbados that was one of the factors which caused them to want to transition to 100% renewable. So this translates to a serious burden on the country that suppresses economic growth and contributes to energy poverty. We have developed an energy policy for Dominica, and 5 primary policy objectives are addressed. In particular, increasing access to modern energy services that are safe, affordable, and reliable for all citizens. The provision of energy services for stimulating environmental, social, and economic development. Managing energy-related environmental health and safety impacts. Enhancing resilience through diversity and distributed energy services. And improving governance in the energy economy. I think there can be no doubt that increased sustainability due to continuous improvements in energy efficiency and greater utilization of domestic renewable energy resources will benefit our citizens and boost the economic future and overall resilience of Dominica to external shocks. From a practical standpoint, I want to highlight where Dominica is and some of what we are working on. Currently, our production for hydro is 28.5% with a capacity of 17.7%. And Hurricane Maria, production was as high as 48% with a capacity of 24.8%. We are currently pursuing the development of a geothermal plant that we expect in the first instance will provide production of approximately 55 to 60%. So we expect to achieve 100% renewable energy with hydro, geothermal, and solar long before 2030. We're also considering installation of micro solar grids for certain areas. And we have introduced incentives to encourage the purchase of electric vehicles. And we're also working on a GCF project to develop sustainable low carbon transport. So these are just a few of the things that we're working on. It is clear that there is a need to educate people and build greater awareness of the benefits of energy efficiency as the low-hanging fruit. and also the exploitation of renewable energy. We in Dominica are pursuing the development of an energy management guide for public buildings, private businesses, and homes. So we'll be looking at issues such as energy management, lighting systems, ventilation, renewable energy sources, creating green buildings, among other things. And that guide would satisfy the requirements of our national energy policy, the Caribbean Sustainable Energy Roadmap and Strategy, CSUMS, which we heard about earlier, and the CARICOM Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code and other energy efficiency requirements. There really is a need for us to be innovative and to think outside of the box in approaching issues of RE and EE for our region. You may be aware that the University of the West Indies, UWI, designed and built a net zero energy building on the Mona campus. We recently partnered with them in exploring options for the development of more energy efficient and self-sufficient buildings with decentralized sources of energy such as biogas and photovoltaic supplies. This is particularly important as we consider the issue of building resilience to disasters. That project will explore the potential for using locally available low energy, low carbon materials as substitutes for concrete and steel. And this is potentially quite transformative and something that can benefit all of us in the region. So while RE and EE are certainly key facets of Dominica's transition to a resilient nation, as you may know, we have the goal to become the first climate resilient nation by 2030, and we're working assiduously towards that end. We continue to encourage and support investments in the area of RE and EE as a particularly important aspect of that resilience building. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barron. I think that was very insightful. I think as countries navigate, we will definitely have some experience that we want you to share with us. I think one of the strategies I would want you to implore is we have what we call on the CARICOM Energy Knowledge Hub, we have what we call the community of practice. And we think it would be useful for your team to link to link with other persons across the region to share your experience because we are better in numbers than separated. No man is an island. And when you're navigating this space, as you look at the Quebec, as you look at the CCREEE, as you look at your plans to get to your 2020-30 goals, you know, Barbados obviously have some good experiences. It's good for all this community, the CARICOM community, to share those experiences and so that we can collectively build a better tomorrow. So thank you so much for that intervention. Now, the next man, you have a big responsibility, Jomo, being a utility manager. You know, you touch the lives of everybody in your country, and like most utilities, that is the nature of your work. You know, connecting with those people, dealing with them, you know, both at the social level, at the economic level, at the environment level, because of the nature of what you're undertaking. This is the era of disruption. And I know in the past, you know, there was a standard operating modality in terms of how utilities work. You get a fuel, you put it into a box, it generates electrons, and everybody is happy. And that normally evolved into a central station for that to go around the country. But we have seen the era of disruption. We have seen demand shifts. You know, we have seen the advent of e-mobility. We have seen, you know, distributed energy generation. We have seen storage. We have seen a lot of technology advancement that will consider disruption. And, you know, persons talk about disruption. You have good disruptions and you have bad disruptions. You know, hurricanes are bad disruptions and EVs are good disruption. So within that framework and within this energy transition that we now seek from a utility standpoint, given, you know, the regulatory environment, the policy framework, you heard Joseph spoke about the finance mechanisms and the type of certainty that markets need. You know, from a utility standpoint, how are you navigating this space and how are you trying to build greater resilience within your market and type of technology advancement you are adopting to support these initiatives?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Gary. It is indeed an interesting time for the electric utility. You know, if we just think about the COVID-19 pandemic. That was one of the first opportunities, I would say, most recent opportunities for us to see the diversity that the utility can put out. We were faced with the challenge of having our staff to work remotely, customers not being able to come in to pay, and we were then able to put certain procedures in place for online payments. A lot of your processes, the normal processes that we would take some time to come into the utility to proceed. We put a lot of those functions online and made them more automated instead of more paper-based or manual. So the utility is faced with always having to make that transition. You spoke earlier about fossil fuel. Fossil fuel definitely is, prices are low right now and on the rise very shortly. And again, being in a pandemic, that has put the utility in a place where we again have to try to adjust to meet the needs and demands. Electricity is no longer a commodity, it's a necessity. Everybody requires electricity to produce whatever it is from whatever different field. Now, us here in St. Kitts, being a tourism-driven economy, we now have to look at more ways to keep that the energy demand on a high. For us here in St. Kitts, you mentioned earlier the 30 megawatt solar farm. So that is one of the first stages of decentralization. We are, instead of moving from the traditional thermal energy, we're increasing our RE portfolio with that solar farm. That has given us the opportunity to increase our capacity, our in-house capacity. We've sent a number of our staff on training, and we've not only seen benefits in the long run, but immediately right now, our staff is currently doing a retrofit of an existing solar farm using all in-house capacity. So that I would say are some of the benefits that we can see coming out of this shift from the traditional thermal into more RE and electrical efficiency. The sister island of Nevis also, there's the potential for geothermal energy. And one of the things we're also looking at is the interconnecting of both islands so that we are able to share the resources. So we would have a solar farm here in St. Kitts. If they develop the geothermal plant in Nevis, then once the two islands are interconnected, you can then maximize your RE capacity so that it's shared between both islands. That will lead to, again, building more in-house capacity. Joseph at CDB is very instrumental in the planning and designing of that. And this is where it comes back to the whole PPF that CCREEE has implemented. So in the near future, I can definitely see that the entire process will. Hello? Oh, yes. Sorry. So in closing, I can say that definitely the utility has been making the necessary steps so that we can weather the storm that is ahead of us.
Thanks very much for that. And I like your last, that to weather the storm. I think that is going to be very important for us. You refer to capacity, and a critical part, you'll have heard me refer to the 5P principle, people. I mean, that human capacity is going to be so critical for our transformation. And with that said, this is where I'm not going to call it a burden. This is where the focus of our youth lies, in the transformation of the work that we want to undertake. I always look at the youth in the form of a triangle, or look at the globe in the form of a triangle, and how the youth, or a pyramid, and how the youth is part of that pyramid. I see the youth at the base of that pyramid, the foundation, and then people know go up in life and they will get to the apex. But that foundation has to be extremely strong. I must first apologize to Aria. I know as grown adults, we have created a very bad disruption in terms of climate. We have done a lot of bad to make the climate what it is today. So I want to apologize to you officially on this forum. We are trying, however, moving forward, because you can see my grades, we are trying, however, moving forward to give you an enabling environment to make it better for the generation that follows you. So that is what we are doing now. We are having these level of engagements to create a more enabling environment for you. But with that said, there might be more things that you want us to do, things that we have neglected to do, or things that we're not doing enough. And we want to hear from you as we move through this transition, and in particular, what you have experienced in this pandemic, and how things have looked a little more difficult as you innovate, demonstrate, to replicate, to become entrepreneurship in this space. As jobs are not readily available anymore, but you have the ability to think outside of the box, more than persons who have been so ingrained in their old ways. Try to share with us some of these things that we could actually do, and what you encourage us as some of the leaders in the industry. What are some of the things that we would need to do better, and to encourage your involvement moving forward? Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. And good morning to the panelists, and thank you for CCREEE for having me this morning. It's a very interesting and timely discussion for me, especially someone living here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, given the eruptions of last February. And I think that more than having renewable energy and energy efficiency being the next side of climate resilience, but my thing is looking at how we can really integrate that into a multi-hazard risk environment. And given that, we see the importance of EE and RE, not just, in creating a climate for a better future, but also through COVID-19, and now with the volcanic eruption and how that has disrupted people's everyday life and movement and so forth like that, especially young people. As you know, school is out, and there's really no sort of definite date as to when things would come back to some normalcy. And I think that this is a very important project, the PPE, and how it can really help young people in developing projects and making them bankable and so forth like that. But what I personally think is that we have to engage young people at an earlier stage. I think it is important to get them to be more exposed, to feel, to touch, to come in contact with, and to see representatives of these sorts of things within our current environment. And, the youth, young people represents a large workforce, a large section of our population who could really drive this transition. And that is why I think it is extremely important. I mean, they are living in these times, and they understand the sort of disruptions and the difficulties. So I think it is important for us to not only facilitate and engage them in forums like these, but it is also important to give them a seat at the table. And oftentimes what you see in the past with various projects, the seat is often given when it's time to distribute the project forward to young people, right? But I think it's so important for them to be at the initial stage. Let them have that space and the power to craft policies, and not just at the regional level, because that is very important. I often find there's a disconnect between what happens on the regional level and the national level as well. So not just only be given that seat at the table at the regional level, but at the national level, be able to craft policies, be able to craft communication concepts of this, because one of the things that we need to realize, young people like things to be communicated to them in a way that is interesting, in a way that seems that, you know, renewable energy and EE is integrated into their everyday life. It is important for them to see it at, you know, at that light, and not just a sort of separate entity. I think that is very important. And let me give you an example. As a green engineering lecturer, one of my year two SBA groups, their project is to redesign a green building on the campus. And they went around, they looked at the problems, they understood what they were, and they have come up with a design to create a net zero building. And you're talking about 17 and 18-year-olds. So I think young people have the capacity to do so. But I think it's important for us to engage with them and have access to funding, and not just to be able to make projects bankable. I think seed funding is also very important. You know, you give a brief snippet of the fact that I went to the Unleash Lab in Singapore, but this was a very important event because after creating a sort of project on the spot based on one of the SDGs, successful groups were able to pitch that project to investors, and they were, you know, given access to funding to develop the project even further. So I think more opportunities for young people to engage and participate in these sorts of things is also extremely important.
Thank you very much, Ari. I think you have hit the nail on the head, and I think that point about integrating the youth in the work that we're undertaking, instead of going through a process and then telling them this is what we want you to do, but let them be a part of the decision-making environment, and what the type of communication, very critical, and I like that type of communication, and what is communicating and how that is communicating them, and on the environment, the communication platform that they are using. Yes. We are also party to that communication platform, because I know that you kind of communicate different, well, definitely different from me, but it's to understand the language and what it is that they like to platforms that they like to interact on. Yes. So one of the things that I want to put to the you know, just to close off, and I like everybody just to have a 1-minute intervention. And Aria spoke about it in terms of that at the regional level and at the national level. And given our size as a region, the last calculation I did was that we, within the 15 member states, the full members, it's about 45 or 46 million people. No, 18 million people. To take into consideration the other countries, the Cuba, OTCs, it went to, with Dominican Republic, it went up to about 46 million. The world population today is 7.9 billion, almost 8 billion, which represents, we represent very, 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 very small, but a life is a life. An economy is an economy, regardless of its size. But we understand within the global context, as Joseph mentioned, scale is also important, and we have to find mechanisms through like the CCREEE, how we get the small man into the space. So the question is, what are the things that we need to do at a regional and national level to encourage the integration, to facilitate the sustainable energy transition that each of our member states seek? It will appear that everybody have very ambitious goals. It would appear that we all want to build better for tomorrow. So I think from a broad objective standpoint, we all have the same goals. The question to you is, what are some of the mechanisms, through your closing, a 1-minute intervention, what are some of the mechanisms we can use to create this regional and national intervention to support a better tomorrow, or a more resilient tomorrow going forward? So I will start with you, P.S. Blackman, on that question.
Thank you, Gary. For us, maybe fortunately, the ministry in its current construct now has the division of small business and entrepreneurship attached to it. So that section, that side of the ministry, we've been trying to forge relationships. Also, we have in Barbados, there are some agencies that have been set up to help drive youth in business. There's a youth entrepreneurship scheme So we have been forging partnerships at that level, because for us, the initial foray was to think about the economic relationships and basically having an appreciation for what energy means for us in the economy from the economic side. And then, because we are all players of that, trying to understand how do you build businesses, and also understanding the role of energy as a very critical input to how productive, how success, your competitiveness in your own businesses. So that has been the premise on how we have been engaging now with these other partners, and so that people look at projects not as an aside, but integral to their being competitive, if they're able to reduce the cost of energy. And then we've also been tackling it, also showing the opportunity that if you go into renewables, what business opportunities there are that exist. And we believe then that if we are also able to plug into agencies such as CCREEE to partner with us to be part of that, the hub that you are building out, that then you can have young entrepreneurs here in Barbados linking with others across the region as they build out their capacity to explore business opportunities, to explore ways in which they can partner together. So I believe that as these vehicles and instruments then are built out, it provides more of a greater opportunity for people to engage then virtually as we work through the issues of the COVID-19 pandemic, be able to expand because growing a business in a market of 384,000 people, which is really our size, is not sufficient for sustainability. So you need to be able to grow that outside of these borders, our local borders.
Thanks, PS. Joseph, your intervention.
Thanks, Gary, and thanks for the question. So I think we need to keep the message strong and continuous in terms of the benefits. We talk about the climate benefits and the resilience, as you know, but remember, for us as small states, the macroeconomic benefits, expanding the participation in the energy through the MSMEs and even the private citizens is very important, because you realize about economic empowerment, but really down to employment benefits and so on. And then the whole question of doing business, economic competitiveness, to the extent that we can stabilize costs over time or reduce costs. So I think the big message has to be kept frontal and in the minds of everybody. I think there are some easy wins. The government, public sector, it's very easy, I think, for them to take decision to transform the public space. So the built facilities, there's nothing that stops government from moving ahead full speed. Financing is available to transform their facilities, whether it's fleet, the energy efficiency in building, or the processes in terms of procurement and so on. I mean, that's very clear, that's easy. For the private sector, I think there shouldn't, I mean, when you think about how long we're at this thing, I think right now there shouldn't be a building that is going up that doesn't incorporate solar, because solar is an abundant resource that is here. We have an advantage globally and the prices are right. So those are decisions that can be taken at different levels within country. But I think one of the things we have to be mindful of, well, let me say this, where government needs to make investment, I think the PPP model needs to be seen as a vehicle, and whatever is necessary in terms of the policy framework, I think need to be put in place so that happens, because for a long time, governments are going to be stretched in terms of budget and fiscal spaces and so on. So let's agree on that one. I mentioned the climate vulnerability thing aspect and the environmental, that has to be a big focus. But the last one I want to mention is the risk of inequity in terms of those who are at the lower end of the income scales. not participating. And in that regard, there needs to be greater availability of soft resources. We're looking at that at CDB as we look at our updating our policy and strategy. The tariffs have to be more nimble in terms of accommodating that. Cross-subsidization is a bad word, but in the context of social support for some of those who will be left out because they can't afford, I think that's a mechanism that may need to be tapped in terms of ensuring that those at the bottom of the scale can participate or given appropriate opportunities. And finally, targeted programs. I think government will have to take policy decision. Regulators will be important in establishing targeted programs which the banks can come in and support to ensure that those at the bottom are also participating, because it's a market failure issue, really. And so it becomes a regulatory matter also. So there are things the government can do easily. There are things that the people who are involved with building and the framework can do easily, that once we're doing construction nowadays, we need to integrate RE and E in it, period. And it makes it cheaper in the long run. And then there are steps that have to be taken to support inclusivity in terms of participation. And the bank is here to support in all of those areas. Thanks.
Thanks, Joseph. Ms. Barron, your intervention, please.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Just to focus on the 3 areas, I think education and awareness building is critical. There are many good ideas out there for RE and EE projects. However, translating that into bankable and actionable projects is a challenge. And I think that's where the assistance of the PPF will be invaluable. So that is key. Secondly, the area of capacity building and technology transfer is something that we need to focus on as well. Having the requisite know-how and encouraging more persons to be involved and be aware of what the options are. And the third area is in respect of being able to access affordable finance and to ensure that the necessary incentives are made available for persons. These are exciting areas, but one has to be cognizant of having an enabling environment to encourage development of technologies. Just to make the point that we have to manage the process adequately. Because we are a small economies and small societies, where there is, we have to achieve the correct balance, because if you have persons who are able to afford going off-grid, then that leaves the burden on the few who are most likely the poor and vulnerable to meet the cost of the centralized distribution. So this must be managed in a proper manner to ensure that we see the benefits across the board. So thank you for that. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this discussion.
Thank you very much. And Jomo, your 1 minute intervention.
Thank you again, Gary. I think for the utility, it's just a matter of us being able to adjust to the changes that come about through law. SCELEC being a government-owned utility run as a private institution provides an additional challenge where we have the overarching responsibility to the people of St. Kitts to provide a reliable and cheap source of energy. And at the same time, we must also be able to adapt to the changes in technology and also implement them accordingly so that the nation does develop. Training, I will again stress on training and capacity building. That is going to be very critical in the transition from more thermal fossil fuel-based to RE technologies, and access to funding. Joseph mentioned it earlier, CDB is always ready to assist where necessary in terms of providing funding for the different studies that have to be done, and even in terms of the actual implementation of the projects. So in closing, I would say the utility just has to continue to be flexible and not break by the pressures that are being put on it by the change in the atmosphere.
Thanks for that. And Aria?
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes, all the panelists have said a lot, but all I just want to simply say in the end is that it's important for us to mainstream EE and RE. I think this will not only reach young people, but those who are also, on the more vulnerable scale. And just to give you an example, how would a disaster, climate and disaster risk financing instrument look, which bundles being able to access insurance to be able to protect your farms against any perils, and also being able to buy solar powered equipment to use on your farm to be able to go completely off grid. I think these are the things that we really need to think about. And also mainstreaming through our educational system, starting from the little bababs come up, as I say, they have to see, they have to interact, they have to touch to be able to trigger that sort of, that sort of innovative spark within them to be able to come up with projects that are scalable and so forth like that. So that's just two things I just want to highlight there. And thank you so much for having me today.
Well, thanks to the distinguished panel. I am really appreciative of your interventions. I think this was very good and very insightful. And I hope the participants of this forum was as exciting and learned a lot from what our panelists had to provide us today. So I wanted to say thanks to all our distinguished panel for your interventions. And we hope that we will, through the mechanisms that we have spoken about today, that we will utilize those mechanisms and build new mechanisms to support not only the national landscape of your transition, but the regional landscape of our transition. Together, we can. Thank you so much for your time. And I'll pass on to my distinguished colleagues. Over to you.
A sincere thanks to our moderator and our panelists, a suitably engaging conversation, the diversity of which surely signaling the necessity for a multi-player approach to transitioning our energy sector within the Caribbean. And of course, we've heard from several of the panelists and the moderator, the important role of the CCREEE project preparation facility in assisting us through to implementation. And at this point, I again encourage our attendees, please type in your questions into the chat. We already have some questions which we're going to pass on to the Q&A section. But before we do that, and remember, as the PPF was newly launched in November, and we continue to further develop and tweak the PPF to meet the needs of the Caribbean people, your input is surely appreciated. And so we have only 2 polling questions that will assist us in redefining or tweaking the PPF to suit your needs. So over to you, Galen, as we proceed to the polls, and then we will proceed to the Q&A section, and then we will invite Dr. Gardner for his closing remarks. So up on the screen, you should now see the polling questions. Please respond by selecting your appropriate answers. And to assist, question 1, what category of support for sustainable energy project development does your ministry or organization currently require most? And question 2, an interesting one, the public sector clients to the PPF should contribute a success or service fee of between 2 and 4% to the CCREEE for services rendered. Please state if you strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. And we have just about 40% of our attendees responding so far. We will give it one more minute so we could get as close to 100% as possible. We are encouraging you to cast your vote. And as we wrap up our poll, let me thank you for participating, and we move immediately into the Q&A segment. Our first question, I believe, goes to P.S. Blackburn. Are there any studies that support the Barbados policy or the notion that solar water heaters have a net positive effect on the public sector expenditure or foreign reserves? P.S. Blackburn. P.S. I believe you are muted.
My apologies. Yes. We did have a study conducted a number of years ago. The ministry has been exploring the opportunity to conduct a more updated and recent study to have a more updated set of figures to tell us exactly what the savings has been. But yes, there has been study which did reflect that there is savings that particular subsector has contributed to the overall economy. I cannot indicate at this time, I can't recall the exact figure, but I know it has been a substantial sum.
Thanks, PS. And the next was not really a question, but rather a comment, which I am happy to share. Confirmation and agreement with ARIA that a seat at the table is important for the youth. Again, signaling the eagerness of the youth to solve problems because the youth enjoy challenges. I certainly remember in my youth enjoying challenges, so that must be true. And therefore joining at the stage where all discussions have been made and projects designed does not leave enough room for inputs. At that stage, the youth are provided simply with an avenue for feedback. So we take that point and I move to the next question, and I perhaps will pose that question to the moderator or allow the moderator to decide which panelists will respond. And the question is there a way that businesses and customers can calculate the feasibility of the change out of their own energy supply to a more sustainable means?
Thanks, Charlene. There is mechanisms of doing that. As a matter of fact, through our Knowledge Hub, which has recently been launched, the CARICOM Energy Knowledge Hub, or Regional Knowledge Hub has been launched. We want to provide information there for you to do that calculation. As a matter of fact, utilities are now doing that for their customers, where you can do a simple calculation as it relates to your payback on some of the interventions you may consider, for example, your lighting or a particular appliance that you want to replace. And more so, one of the things that is being considered moving forward for the region is establishing what we call an integrated utility service models, where your utilities your electric utilities, that is, will provide you with that information to support you making those changes to achieve savings, and you will have a shared savings with them so that you can have a better sustainable future in that regard. So again, that goes with partnerships that will need to be forged to support that type of initiative. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. And this ends the questions and comments that we have. So we will proceed into our very last item. And before that, let me remind you, for more information on the CCREEE PPF, please visit www.ccree, that's CCREE.org/PPF. Or you could write to us via email, ppf@ccree.org for further information. At this point, I am pleased to invite Dr. Devon Gardner, the head of the energy program at CARICOM Secretariat, to deliver our closing remarks.
Good morning, moderator. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I have been blessed to have participated in this rich discussion around the PPF, and more importantly, I do hope we all consider ourselves blessed to be within the energy sector actively engaged at this time when we have such a monumental facility as the PPF being rolled out, initiative as the PPF being rolled out. I say monumental because this is something, as ASG Cox said in his opening, has been on the table for a while. There has been many discussions, many iterations, many attempts, oftentimes through development partners, sometimes at national levels, and at times we tried some regional things that have not yielded the kind of success that we had hoped for. And we believe that with the CCREEE participating as it is in accordance with the mandate around which it was set up, that this time we are on the road to achieving some success with a facility such as this. I want to start by reminding us of a few key details, ladies and gentlemen, in this regard. One is, as ASG also pointed out, you're talking about billions, around $20 billion of investment to reach the targets that countries have agreed to at the regional level. And in some instances, countries have even gone ahead and made those targets more ambitious through their own national notions that they have since announced. So we expect that these numbers will even have to be revised upwards. We're talking about situations in which countries have to find as much as 20% of their GDPs to finance those changes or those targets that they have set themselves for the energy transition to happen. We are also talking about this happening at a time when many countries have lost between 19 to 29% of their GDP, typically what that would be had it not been for the COVID-19 situation. Countries have lost significant amounts of their GDP because of downturns in their economic activities over the past 2 years, and are on the road, some believe, to lose more again this year. So we are talking about countries that are increasingly under stress. We are talking about situations where some of what we expected in terms of the improvements from the COVID-19 situation have not materialized, because we have seen Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago and a few other countries go into new lockdowns because of new waves of infections. We have seen also the infection situation in India, which is diverting a lot of the resources, especially vaccinations, from the region, and that could have significant impact on how quickly our economies could reopen. And so we are talking about investments, significant amount of investments at a time when we know that our countries, the majority of them, do not have the money to invest. And so the project preparation facility is an important tool that is necessary for us to glue what's available in the financial markets out there with what the policy directions and the strategic targets of the countries are. So in a sense, we are working to a large extent on a lot of issues around policy and strategy. And we know that there are a lot of financial instruments out there, both public financial instruments and private financial instruments at the global level that target sustainable energy. We know of the GCF as one of the main public funds that are there, but there are also other public funds that are in countries capable of supporting investments. In fact, we also know of the public funds too that are in the IFIs, the World Banks, the IDBs, and of course our own CDB. And then when it comes to private funds, there are many different private instruments that are out there. Every day I get bombarded with questions about where it is that there are opportunities for investing in clean energy development within the region. So if it is that we are going to be progressing significantly on policy and we're going to be seeing all this money out there that's available and the policy situation environment supports the investments, then the glue that is going to be necessary is the ability of the region to generate the types of projects and the amounts of projects that will attract that money into the ground. So at the end of the day, this is a very important piece of the puzzle as it regards how it is that we can achieve that energy revolution. Critically, colleagues, when in 2014, when member states began for the first time to consider the discussions around this establishment of the CCREEE, it was very clear from day one that the main role of the CCREEE within the region was to fill that gap of helping countries to identify, develop, and bring to financial closure those projects that could assist them with their energy transformation. Critically, ladies and gentlemen, while it is that we took a while to establish the CCREEE formally, that has never ever disappeared from the mandate and the intent of the CCREEE. And so it is pleasing to see that 6 years later, after all the deliberations, that we are at a stage where the CCREEE is being able to set up itself to deliver on that mandate. But there is much that is left for us to walk that road, ladies and gentlemen. And so the critical challenge is going to be how it is that the CCREEE will be able to work more assiduously in a more roll-up sleeve fashion, hand in hand with member states to actually bring the rubber to the road. Because the intent is really not for the project preparation facility to function as really a desk-based arrangement, but rather that desk-based arrangement is just a small part of what really leads to significant amount of heavy lifting on the ground in countries, because it's only when the heavy lifting takes place in countries where the public ideas and the private ideas can be suitably brought to mesh and to bear on what the strategic goals and the strategic intentions of the countries are through the development work, a lot of hard, long development work that will bring those ideas, as ASG Cox said, and that a number of our colleagues have pointed out, from the concept stage to investment readiness, that we will see the benefits of the PPF. And so I want to thank Dr. Jackson and his team for having taken the time out to bring the PPF to where it is, and to also thank them in advance for where the PPF will be going over the next years to come. And I want to take the opportunity to thank our partners, our development partners who have been with us through thick and thin, to help us to get to this stage where both the CCREEE has been established and the CCREEE has now embedded the PPF arrangements. I want to thank, of course, a number of development partners. They have been suitably thanked, but I must, again, highlight the role that UNIDO, SIDSDOC, and the Austrian government played in the initial stages of the CCREEE development. And I must highlight the role that the European Union and the GIZ has played in the development of the PPF this far. And I also expect that within this context, with the work that the CDB is doing in respect to its own investment instruments to support the financing aspect of projects when they are available, and with the role that the Secretariat is doing to continue to improve the state of policy and regulations and of course planning within the region, with policies, strategies, and plans that shows what the investment pipeline look like, and with monies available in instruments that can finance those pipelines, we think that the PPF is the critical link to making all of this happen. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for the time, for the dedicated support, and we expect that you will, of course, seek to find ways through which you can participate in and benefit from the PPF. Naturally, private sector and public sector needs to work closely, not just in respect to the development of projects, but also looking at models through which projects could be jointly owned through increasing PPP arrangement, public-private arrangements, because it is oftentimes when we have those public-private arrangements that we will get the best mix of the investments that are required, as well as the public service obligations being suitably reflected in projects. At the same time too, we also see critical amounts of opportunities for blending financing from public and private streams. And with the continued support of the CCREEE, of private and public sector, it is going to be in a position to see where the best opportunities exist for mixing and matching private and public funds, and for elucidating private and public cooperative arrangements for projects to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you again and do have a good day. All the best.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner. Thank you, Dr. Gardner, for these very strong closing remarks. And I also thank the attendees, our ASG Cox, who delivered our welcome remarks, Dr. Gary Jackson, and our esteemed panelists, and the rest of the CCREEE team working behind the scenes. And as I close, I remind that investment in sustainable energy is a clear winner to boosting our economies. And over to you, Galen, as we show once again a video that summarizes the PPF and its offerings. Thank you so much for joining.
The Project Preparation Facility, or PPF, is a project development support resource designed to help you advance the preparation of sustainable energy projects so that they can successfully attract financing. The PPF not only provides advice and technical assistance, but also helps to link bankable projects to investors and financiers, and serves as a pathway to much-needed financial investment. If you are a project owner, private sector developer, part of an NGO or similar enterprise seeking to advance a sustainable energy project in the CARICOM member states, then you may qualify for support. The Project Preparation Facility supports medium to high capacity renewable energy and energy efficiency technology projects, including biomass and biofuel, biogas, geothermal, ocean technologies, solar PV and thermal, hydropower, energy storage, wind, waste to energy, and greenfield, brownfield, and scale-up enterprises such as energy power generation, efficiency, and solutions projects. For more information on project preparation facility support, visit www.ccree.org/ppf.